So in this video, I want to talk about the grain deal, and I don't have any visuals for you. I did jot down a bunch of notes about it, just to get a sense of what's going on. So some background to this was that early in the war, Ukrainians couldn't get their ships out because the Russian Navy was out in the Black Sea, and they need to get their grain out. Now, the Ukraine supplies a tenth of the world's grain. I mean, they're a really significant player in getting grain out to the rest of the world. And Putin signed a grain deal that would allow Ukrainian ships to pass through, and now he was supposed to get things out of it. Their fertilizer and some of their grain would be able to be, and some of the restrictions or sanctions would be lifted that allowed their grain to go out. And now they're saying that they're not actually getting those. They've never gotten their side of the deal, and they're pulling out. The grain deal lasted a year, and then three months ago or so, I don't remember exactly how long, Erdogan was in the middle of his election, and Erdogan brokered the deal. He's the president of Turkey. So he brokered in the middle of his re-election campaign an extension to the deal. Now that helped Erdogan, okay? And that's what you need to know about Erdogan is about Erdogan. He works with Ukraine where he can work with Ukraine. He works with Russia where he can work with him, but it's all for Turkey's interest. Okay, so Putin pulls out of the grain deal when it finally ended officially. That was just a couple days ago. Then the Kerch Bridge is hit. Now, I don't know that those are connected. In fact, I'm pretty sure that they're not, that Putin he was talking about pulling out of the grain deal. Peskov, as much as he lies, I think was telling the truth this time that it was not connected to the Kerch Bridge thing. And so they tried to do it a few times before, like they have talked about, we're going to pull out of this grain deal. Now, again, it was Erdogan that kept it going. And there are about 6 scenarios that I can think of of what will happen. And I'm going to go from the best scenario for Putin to the worst scenario for Putin with what will come next. Okay, so in a best case scenario for Putin, from Putin's perspective, they pull out of the grain deal. Ukraine can't get their food to the market, and this is going to cause a hurt for Ukrainians, for them economically, when they can't get their grain to anywhere to sell, or it's going to be very hard to do that, or very much more expensive. It's also going to create food insecurity for tens of millions of people in the poorest places on Earth. So in parts of Africa, Asia, parts of the global South. What Putin would hope to do with that, or what he was hoping to do before, was actually cause them to want to call for an end to the war. And I think he's hoping that that's what's going to happen, or that they will ally with Russia to pressure or counterbalance or create the new bloc that he's working on trying to create with the BRICS Plus. Or maybe he will look at them and try to give them, more favored. If you're more aligned with Russia, you get this grain from Russia at, cheaper than what it's cost, because it'll cost more on the world market, because supply and demand, simple supply and demand. Less food means higher price because the same number of people demand it. And so for all those reasons, I think he thinks he's in a controlling position if he can block Ukrainian grain from getting out. And that's a very bad scenario. And he doesn't care about people that might be starving, or whatever, legitimately starving. I don't mean I'm hungry, I haven't eaten since lunch, I'm starving. I mean legitimate food insecurity. But he will use that as a weapon of war. And that works with Gerasimov's hybrid warfare theory. Okay, so but I don't know that that's actually going to happen. I think Putin might have been told that that's what's going to happen, and he might even believe it, but I don't think that that's what's going to happen. A more likely scenario is that a new grain deal will be signed in time, and it'll revert back to what it is before. In the meantime, the third scenario is that food goes out in less efficient means. It goes out by trains, it goes out by rivers, it goes out by trucks. But trucks and trains and rivers are far less efficient at transporting the grain than a large cargo ship. I mean, it's orders of magnitude less efficient to do it that way. it can go out. It will go out. I mean, if there's no other alternative, but it still, there'll be millions of people that will be affected by that with food insecurity. Okay, so the fourth scenario is that Ukraine tries to get the food out. They put them on ships, they load them, they go through Turkey on the way out of the Black Sea, and Russia just does nothing. Now, in this scenario, Russia actually loses something because they're pulling out of a deal of threatening this, but then they look weak by not actually doing something. And so that puts Russia on the back foot, so to speak. Like, hey, look, you were saying that they can't do this. They can't. Are they going to really let them pass through with their navy there? I think they might have to, because that was scenario number 4. Scenario number 5 is that the Russian Navy fires on a passenger or cargo ship that's trying to bring food to African and Asian countries that are food insecure otherwise. And that's a really bad look if you sink that kind of ship, even if you're in a war with them. Like, they don't have any weapons. They're just trying to get food out, right? That's a worse look than doing nothing. And then the 6th scenario is even worse than that. So Turkey continues to escort these Ukrainian ships with their own warships. Turkey's part of NATO. Russia's not likely to fire on a NATO ship doing this grain, just shipping the grain out and that kind of thing. Now, that, if Erdogan decides to do that, that really pokes Putin in the eye. And again, it increases Erdogan's stock or his stature, and the whole world, except for Russia's clearest allies like Venezuela or North Korea, will applaud Turkey for doing that. So that will be a feather in Turkey's cap. But in these scenarios, it goes from best for Russia to worst for Russia. I don't think those last 2 or 3 are probable. It's possible, but I don't think that's going to happen. I think it's more likely that they'll seek less efficient means until a new grain deal is struck. And I hope it's struck soon, because we want to see this grain get out so that people can eat. We've had enough inflation post-COVID that it's already bad for many people in the world, and we don't want to see it any worse. Okay, that's my read of what is going to happen with the grain deal. If I was a betting man, I would say that they'll resolve it in time. They're just trying to get some kind of concessions. And so I'm not really worried about it, but you never know, because there's always a wild card here, especially when Putin is trying desperately not to look weak, and he's looked weak again and again and again. And like the first Kerch Bridge and the Moskva, and then Wagner, and then the second Kerch Bridge attack. And so he might just be in a different mental space than where you would hope that he is. But that's my read of these events. Okay, what do you think? How do you think this will play out? I'm very curious. And if you have any particular articles that you've read or videos that disagree with me, or that point me to, yeah, this is probably the way it'll go, I'd like to see it. Share it with the community. Thank you for your time. Thank you for the shares, the likes, the coffees. Thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine. I'll be back tomorrow. I hope you will be too.